Welcome to your third neurology video, and in this video we're going to be talking about neurons. And I just want to say that learning about neurons is so important because when we're going to be talking about drugs that affect the brain and different things like that, knowing about neurons is going to be important because we're going to go into more details about different neurotransmitters and chemical signals in future videos, and we're even going to talk about action potentials and resting potentials and things like that. So learning about neurons early on is important. It's going to come up again and again. It's very important if you're going into medical careers, and if you're going to do things with patients, you really need to learn about brain cells. So as you can see in this video, I have this photo of a neuron, and the different parts of the neuron are shown. And we're just going to go through this photo and identify, as you can see, the round part right there in the center, that is actually called the cell body, and it's often referred to as the soma, but it's it is the cell body. And right there you see the nucleus. That is the thing that is in the center, the red circle in the center. That's where the genetic information is mostly stored. You've got all the chromosomes in there. And then you've got the ER, right? And from cell biology, I'm sure a lot of you know that the difference between the ER and the smooth R is that there are ribosomes that are attached to the ER. You've got the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the plant, and which is where there's a lot of energy generated in the form of ATP. And I want to talk about dendrites here because this is the distinction between regular cells and neurons, right? Regular body cells. You've got these dendrites in neurons, and you don't see this in other cells for the most part. But these dendrites actually are important for taking in various chemical signals from other cells and taking that information and converting it into an electrical form of information. So dendrites are really the big thing when you think about neurons. Dendrites are really the big thing that you want to think about. And then you've got those dendritic branches, as you can see. And then you've got the Golgi, you've got the Axon Hillock. We're going to talk about the Axon Hillock, but the axon is this long line that you see there, and that's where the electrical signal is transmitted during action potentials. The Axon Hillock, I want to say this, that it's where when the signal is taken by the dendrite and it's brought into the cell body, this signal can be taken in the form of EPSPs or IPSPs. Again, we're not going to linger too much on this, but the Axon Hillock is really important in terms of conducting and building up that information before the information is fired in the form of an action potential down the axon, which the information then goes in electrical form, and it goes down the axon and eventually reaches the terminal buttons, which are at the other end, and that's where the signal is converted to a chemical neurotransmitter. So as you can see right here, I'm going to draw little black circles because although this is a good picture of a neuron, a couple of things are missing, and those things are myelin sheaths. And myelin sheaths are actually work to kind of protect the axon, because this is where electrical information is sent, electrical signals, and this is very important for the brain, because if your brain is working at its best, electrical signals have to be fast, the axon has to be well protected. So myelin sheaths are these little round things that kind of cover the axon, and not only do they cover the axon, but they also speed up the electrical impulse. So the electrical signal bounces from myelin sheath to myelin sheath, and as it goes up and down, speed is gained through that, and actually the space between two myelin sheaths is actually called a node of Ranvier, which is actually where speed is picked up during an electrical signal that is sent down the axon. So as you can see, neurons are very, very complex cells. They're much different from, regular cells that we've learned in mitosis and meiosis during cell biology. Neurons are brain cells, and they're very much different from the other cells that we've discussed in the previous videos. Assuming that the myelin sheaths do not properly do their jobs by covering the axon and speeding up electrical signal, or maybe that they're removed from the axon, by the body's own immune cells, right? So that, for instance, the myelin sheaths are confused for a toxic substance by the body. If that happens, then a condition that is called multiple sclerosis results. And this results in the patient losing memory abilities, losing the ability to do certain tasks that really require electrical signals of neurons, right? That really require action potential. One thing that's important to talk about when discussing neurons is the chemicals that are stored within these things called terminal buttons. And the terminal buttons are actually at the end of the neuron. As you can see right there, there's the synaptic terminals, so this little circle that I'm drawing here can represent the terminal buttons, and you have these chemicals. When the signal is transmitted from the axon into the terminal buttons, the signal becomes chemical when it's in this terminal button. And for instance, the signal can be in the form of neurotransmitters now that we tend to talk about, such as dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, right? These different types of neurotransmitters that really affect the body when they are released into the synapse. And so this is where it gets very tricky. But yeah, so the terminal buttons house the various neurotransmitters that we tend to associate. Okay, so that's very important to understand that. And in terms of understanding all of this, again, some understanding these things takes a lot of practice. Cell body is very self-explanatory. If you studied cell biology, you understand the different components that are within cells. The same thing applies for neurons. In terms of the Axon Hillock, this is where the memorizing might come from. Learning what the Axon Hillock does and the role of myelin, how myelin is really important. Again, myelin is made up of fat, right? So for the most part, it's just a little fat that acts as insulation to protect the axon. And learning about the synaptic terminals is really important. And one thing that we forgot to mention is this synaptic cleft. And again, as you can see, this is another neuron where the dendrites of another neuron are branching off here in order to receive the signal from the chemical neurotransmitters of this neuron that is firing here. But between the receiving neuron and the firing neuron, you've got this space called the synaptic cleft, which is a space where neurotransmitters are traveling in order to reach their destinations. So chemicals are going to the receiving dendrites. Put that. So yeah, so neurons, so this is pretty much everything you need to learn about neurons. It does go deeper in terms of action potentials and learning about hyperpolarization and depolarization and resting potential and things like that, but we're not really going to dive deep into that yet. That's for future videos to come. In this video, I really wanted to introduce this concept of a neuron and why it's important to our bodies. How neurons allow us to see things. Billions of neurons are firing as I'm speaking in order to allow me to produce speech, in order to allow me to hear things. Neurons have to fire in order for me to move my arm. My brain had to send action potentials for neurons to help me do this. So, and they're not just located in the brain, but in different parts of the body as well. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next.